Yeah, DC is more of a brute force type electricity, right? That's why it's has its inefficiencies. Like it's good for small electronics.
It used to, but your pulse motor is the exact opposite, where it's like the most efficient now.
Yeah.
So is the pulse motor a DC motor?
It's a DC motor, yes. Yeah, it's a DC motor, but when you got it set up properly, you can. Yeah, you pulse it into that frequency of AC, and it's like I can run my pulse motor. I've had it as low as 120 milliamps, or 120 milliamps of power. That's like nothing, and I can get high voltage back EMF off it around 160 to 170 volts, right?
But so pulsing it up. Sort of,
like when you get the back EMF coming off the coil, you're going to get these spikes. And when you get it right at the right frequency and the right resistance, you can get 160 volt spikes coming back, and that's what you capture. And when you capture it, you dump it into a battery or dump it into a capacitor, and then utilize it for whatever you want to do, right? But as far as like efficiency wise, a pulse DC pulse motor is probably the most efficient motor you'll ever see. So as far as like the pulse motor is concerned, where everybody goes wrong with a pulse motor is they're not using a spark gap switch. Okay, and the spark gap switch, if you're utilizing it properly, it basically negates the Lenz's law. Okay,
so what I believe that is right. It's you have that whole circuit in resonance with itself, or very close to resonance, and then the spark gaps that you're adding in, Mike, are turning that circuit into an open higher circuit dimension endothermic reaction, where it's taking the energy out of the environment, whether it's using radio waves, sound waves, or heat waves. It's taking some sort of that energy and then adding that into the amplitude of that resonance frequency.
Right. It's basically a voltage doubler. If you put, say, two spark gaps together, you're even going to get even more power coming out. So the more power you can add to the system from an exterior source like counter space, as the spark gap is creating, that is basically what's going to save your dipole. Like this, 100 years ago was unheard of. This would be like, Star Trek stuff, right? And Tesla seen all this 100 years ago. You know what? Okay, he didn't have transistors and stuff, but he was using the spark gap. But he started realizing the spark gap, there was something really to this. That he was getting an excessive amount of power coming back through a spark gap. And that's why his earliest Tesla coils were all rotary spark gaps, because they were bringing in such a huge amount of potential into the system that, at first he did not know, where is this power coming from? Was it coming from the antenna? Was it coming from the coil? Or was it coming from the spark gap? And he finally realized, you know what? It's really coming from the spark gap. Not all of it, but a great portion of the excessive amount of voltage that he was creating was coming through a spark gap. So he started figuring, you know what? There must be, this power is coming from counter space. Because, the Tesla coil, if you point a Tesla coil at another Tesla coil directly, and you put a neon bulb through it, and you got it at the proper frequency, there will be a black void that will show up in the neon tube, where the two frequencies of longitudinal wave are hitting each other and creating this void. And that's counter space, when you got two light sources hitting each other.